Impressive.
Herstory.
Epic.
Dynamic.
Energetic.
It is history. Historic.
Historic.
Unprecedented. How about that?
Riveting.
Making her way to the scale, please welcome the challenger. She has been a professional fighter since 2009, amassing a record of 42 wins, 1 defeat, 1 draw, and 30 big wins coming by way of knockout. In 2011, she won her first world title and has now gone on to become the Guinness Book of World Record-setting 9-time 7-division world champion. Ella nació en Carolina, Puerto Rico, and raised in the beautiful borough of Brooklyn, New York. Here is the talented and accomplished women's boxing southpaw sensation, the reigning and unified featherweight champion of the world, la gran campeón puertorriqueña, Amanda, the real deal, Serrano. And her opponent now making her way to the scale, she is the defending undisputed world champion. As an amateur, she won 5 consecutive world championship gold medals, 6 European gold medals, 5 European Union gold medals, and in 2012 in London, she captured Olympic gold. Now, as a professional, her record stands perfect. 20 fights, 20 victories, 6 of them coming by way of knockout. Fighting out of Bray, County Wicklow, Ireland, here is the acclaimed, the celebrated, and the game-changing 2-division and reigning, defending, undefeated and undisputed lightweight champion of the world, Katie Taylor!
This is the pinnacle of women's boxing. A fight between the top 2 pound-for-pound stars, with each fighter cashing in historic 7-figure paydays in 2022. In theory, that sounds great. But actually think about that statement. Women's boxing may have come a long way, but it certainly wasn't always like this. In fact, it's never been like this.
Ladies and gentlemen, referee Ricky Gonzalez calls a halt to this contest.
This is literally 2 ladies showing our young women and men, telling all our youth, whatever you dream of, you can make it happen.
Katie Taylor is someone that is incredibly inspirational to me, to young females, to males, to everybody around the world, because she's continuously not allowed anything to get in the way of her dreams. In 2002, when she walked into Bray Boxing Club, before she walked in, she had to put a head guard on to pretend she was a boy. Girls boxing was banned in Ireland. And in her early amateur career, she was Kay Taylor. She had the head guard on, she had to pretend that she was a boy fighting other boys to get to this position. Fast forward an incredible amateur career, and she campaigned to the IOC to make sure that women's boxing had a place in the Olympics. She was laughed at, as she has been for a long portion of her career. She kept on banging the door down, and eventually women's boxing was installed into the Olympics. She went on and won gold.
Honored to be a part of it. I want to thank Christy Martin and Layla Ali for really making this possible and paving the way for Amanda and Katie. When I first, met Amanda, 7-division world champion, getting paid $5,000, $10,000 for a fight, to think that we are here a year later is massive.
Speaking of women's boxing, though, all these posters,
Yeah.
not one.
Not a single one. No,
Nice.
not a single one. That's kind of that's the point, isn't it? Yeah. Gosh, I've been in boxing now for about 15 years of my life, but basically I've been in boxing my entire life. 'Cause my grandfather was best friends with Arnie Beam, so probably before I can remember, I've been in a boxing gym.
I've been in boxing for 23 years. I started off as an amateur competitor. I won I'm the Ontario champion, 2001 champ, And after I moved on from amateur, Olympics wasn't an option, so I turned pro. I got my pro license, but that was very short-lived because I didn't fight a day. Different reasons, injuries, and so from there I went on to teach boxing for fitness for many years after until present day. And then 2018, I became the first professional boxing ring announcer in Canada. As a fan to watch women's boxing in the 90s, it was exhilarating and hopeful. It was very hopeful. It was exciting. It was, I want to say, confusing because it was almost uncharted territory. So there was this awe behind it. Where is this going to go? And the pressure was on, like, this needs to be good. This needs to be good in order for them to ask us to come back again. This needs to be great in order for us to have a chance at progressing and going further with women's boxing.
My first memories of women's boxing are Christy Martin. That, to me, was probably the first time I'd ever seen women's boxing. I remember being at my uncle's house, and Christy Martin was on the undercard of one of the Tyson fights, and that was the first time that I had ever seen women box. So probably, sometime in my early childhood, I would have seen it for the first time. I was very young at the time. I remember the fight being very exciting because every Christy Martin fight was extremely exciting. That's just the kind of fighter that she was. But as a kid, I don't remember there being anything unusual. I remember it being novel at the time because I hadn't seen it before. But I didn't remember thinking like, oh, this is unpleasant or this shouldn't be happening. And my parents certainly didn't say that either. So I just remember it being an exciting fight. And then I remember not seeing it a whole lot then thereafter.
We had the era of the Lucia Rikers, Layla Ali's, Christy Martins, and then after that, you kind of didn't really hear or see women's boxing at all. So it was pretty much non-existent. And now it's back and it's bigger and better than ever, and it's just going to continue to grow. And on Saturday night is the start of something just enormous for women's boxing. It's going to be an even greater breakthrough for us and for all women.
Of course, seeing Christy Martin on the Tyson fight cards was what made me realize, A, her name was Christy and my nickname was Christy at the time, so it was an obvious sign. I said to her, you're the reason girls just want to box. And she's like, I know, well, okay. And I was like, no, you don't understand. So yeah, she's amazing. Every single female fighter who went up and said anything always started with, I saw Christy Martin fighting in the 90s. I saw Christy Martin fighting in the 90s. So it's literally, she is the reason women's boxing is where it is today.
Honestly, I didn't even know that women boxed professionally, but we have to remember my career started back in 1989. So I just had no idea. There was no trail for me to follow. Of course, I didn't know everybody was against it until I got in it. And then the more they would push against me, the harder I would fight. The more of that I'm going to show you attitude, I just have it. I mean, if you tell me no, I'm going to show you yes. Like Ron Borges, who is a great friend of mine and just wrote the book, Christy Martin, Fighting for Survival, 100% against women's boxing. My good friend now passed, Bert Sugar, 100%, and never changed his mind. Ron Borges, at least I did win him over. Bert Sugar, never won him over. I mean, at the time, you're so consumed with that moment and what's happening at that time. But as I get further away from the career, I now see that it really kick-started women's boxing.
All women have had different ways of making their impacts on boxing. Some set the bar, others try to reach for it. But the biggest problem for a lot of female boxers is they didn't have the Olympics as a stepping stone to get there.
The Olympics, the exposure that women's boxing is getting with the Olympics, that helps bring young female fighters to the gym. But it also adds a goal, like, oh, now I can fight for that gold medal. To me, there's nothing, no better feeling that you could have as standing on the podium with the national anthem playing and that gold medal around your neck. That to me is awesome. That has to be the greatest feeling ever.
When something isn't an option, you almost don't consider it. You just go another avenue. You want it to be different, but you just find another avenue. So when they finally came to their senses and invited us women to participate at the 2012 Olympics, it was a very exciting time.
The effects of women being able to fight in the Olympics, it goes deeper than just, those fighters coming out of the Olympics and then going pro. It's the mere fact that women now have a pipeline within the amateur system to get funded as amateur fighters, and well-funded amateur fighters ultimately turned out to be good professionals, right? It's all a part of this pipeline and a support system that just wasn't there before. And it still isn't fully there in the same way that it is for men, because there are only 3 weight classes. There are only a handful of weight classes for women in the Olympics. There are many more for men. But at least there are a few, right? There are opportunities. And prior to that, women, even on the national teams in their given countries, even here in Canada, even in the United States, are trying to find funding to go and fight in international competitions. Men don't really have to reckon with that in the same way. So the closer that things get between the men's program and the women's program, obviously the closer it's going to get in terms of the talent that is fostered and the opportunities that they then get afterwards. So it's about kind of that system, because everything within national programs runs through the Olympics. And when you're looking for funding from a national program, it all comes down to well, can you go and win an Olympic gold medal? And if your sport has that, there's more money that goes into it. And if there's more money that goes into the sport on the national level, gyms like this that we're in right now, they get more money and everybody wins. And prior to women being able to fight in the Olympics, obviously they just had a fraction of what men were given. That's still the case, but at least it's getting a little bit closer.
On April 30th, 2022, at the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, in New York City, USA, these two generational talents would meet in a ring not only to determine who the pound-for-pound queen was, but to break barriers and make history.
One of the things that's interesting about Taylor Serrano is you kind of have two people from a generation that took two different paths. You have Katie Taylor, who was able to have that storied amateur career, come through the Olympics and then turn pro. Amanda Serrano is kind of one of the fighters from the era prior to that. One of the women's fighters that didn't have all of that support within the amateur system and had to make her way up during a period of time in women's boxing when women were making even less than they are now, had fewer opportunities that they had now, and as I was saying before, when there just were not broadcast opportunities. I mean, Amanda Serrano, in the early stages of her career, she was being promoted by Lou DiBella, who was one of the only promoters in America at all who was willing to stage women's fights and put them on broadcast anywhere. So she was able to fight on SNY, and she was able to get some television coverage on Broadway boxing, but that was just through her promoter at that time. She didn't really have all of these options, and a lot of women who came up in the same era as Amanda Serrano just kind of faded out, because when you're fighting for such small purses, as Serrano was early in her career, she's a millionaire now, but she certainly wasn't. She was nowhere close for so long. A lot of women just, when you don't have those resources, you give up, because what is the point in taking all this damage if you don't get the reward in the end? She was able to battle all the way through that, and it's a remarkable story that she was able to persevere, that she was able to get through that, and is now able to meet one of the women that came up through that Olympic system. It's an amazing kind of generational meetup between two fighters.
Well, here we go. We have the two biggest names in women's boxing fighting each other in Madison Square Garden, and it's two distinct styles. In my opinion, Serrano is, she fights much like I did, the dog, the aggressor, I'm gonna knock you out. attitude. Katie Taylor is a very good boxer. She's a very good boxer puncher. She's going to move. I think it has the potential to be a very great fight and really reignite all the excitement about women's boxing, because it has dulled a lot. You know, we don't have big promoters are not putting female fighters on, and it's hard. It's expensive, number one, like for promoters my size to put female fighters on. But you know, hopefully this just gets everybody excited again. More women will come to the gym, and you know, just another kickstart, another step up.
Only super fights bring out people and celebrities from all over the world, and those type of events don't happen very often. They make it feel like attending is a mandatory obligation, not just a want. It's the fear of missing out, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to witness history at the highest level. Taylor versus Serrano is one of those moments.
Now, what do you guys think is going to happen Saturday night? Obviously, you guys are rooting for Taylor, but how do you think it ends?
It's a 10-round, hard-fought points win for Katie Taylor. Amanda Serrano, great boxer, but Katie special, and special will come through.
The fight of the century, man.
Katie. Katie all day long.
Maybe 10 rounds. There's a possible knockout from either side, so you got to realize they're both great fighters. Amanda has a great heart, and she has a lot of fans here in New York, so she is naturally from New York, and she has demonstrated that she can go down, back up in the weight. She don't have any problem in any division, so she is, right now, pound for pound, the best fighter, female division.
And I've done UFC as well. UFC fights, even if it's considered a mismatch, it's still a 4-1 favorite, 3-1. In boxing, they'll say, oh, it's a 50-50 fight, but you look at the odds and it's like 10-1. But this fight, it feels like a 50-50 fight. The fighters themselves even say it, and the odds makers in Vegas are saying it. So it's one of those fights where I really don't know what's gonna happen. I know what I think might happen, but who knows? This fight, for instance, has been talked about for 3 years and it hasn't happened. If it happened 3 years ago, it would have been like a drop in the puddle. It wouldn't have made nearly as much noise as it is now. So very rarely does boxing get it right, and they probably stumbled into this one, but it's peaking at the perfect time.
Again, it's breaking boundaries, and it shows young women and young men out there that anyone can do this. And for someone to say that you can't, rise to a certain level, they're doing it and they're breaking the ceiling off. And tomorrow night, the big room's going to be sold out.
Fight that you would want to have, represent women's boxing is that fight with those two girls.
It's a must-see. I mean, it's a must-see. It's going to be Where Were You tomorrow night. Hopefully you're here at the Garden.
Time for fight night. Just hours away from witnessing one of the biggest and most important fights to ever take place inside of a boxing ring. The undercard in every boxing event, but especially this one, was the calm before the storm. Objectively, the entire card was worth the price of admission. Kicking things off in fitting fashion was Tokyo Olympian Sky Nicholson. Eventually, leading into a gold medalist from those same games, Galalia Fai. As each fight concluded, more fans filed into Madison Square Garden. The historic venue really started to fill once the first of two female undisputed title fights took place between Franchon Cruz-Dezurn and Aline Cederos. The final act before the main event was a fight to settle a rivalry between two former world champions looking to get back to the gold. Jesse Vargas versus Liam Smith. By the time that ended, MSG was full. And just to be clear, not a lot of boxing fights can sell out the Garden. But this moment was well deserving of a packed house. The ring walks began, and it was written on the faces of both fighters that this was the biggest moment of their lives. Even though at every point leading up to this, things had exceeded expectations, the final step was the most important. Fans were already on their feet. Women's boxing couldn't afford to disappoint. All that was left to do wasn't just to fight, it was to prove that female boxing belongs here. And that's exactly what they did. Through 4 rounds, Taylor was ahead with her elite hand speed and the ability to keep Serrano at bay. But in round 5, that will be in the round of the year conversation, the 7-division champion found her openings and had Taylor hurt. The undisputed queen landed her own big shots that wobbled Serrano, and a lot of people think if 3-minute rounds was agreed upon, that Amanda would have finished the fight right here and then. Instead, the back and forth action continued, Taylor surviving the onslaughts, Serrano gassing out, and no consensus on who was winning each round. Fittingly, the fight made it to the final bell. But before it even got there, a standing ovation was already underway. The fight followed suit with all the lead up to this event and exceeded expectations. And before the cards were even handed in, the fighters embraced each other, acknowledged everyone in attendance and the millions watching around the world, knowing they just left everything they had in that ring. The commentators, the media members, the fans, the fighters, their teams, no one knew how the scorecards would read. Katie Taylor comes away with the result, but honestly, that's not what mattered. These 2 pound-for-pound fighters just proved to the entire world that women's boxing does belong on the big stage. A statement was made. Women's boxing will continue to thrive off of making fights like these multiple times a year, and it's not just because of Taylor versus Serrano. It trickles down to all the women that came before them. This was just the most recent step. The rest is history.